Hello and welcome to North Country Matters. My name is Donna Seymour. I'm a member of the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters, one of the civic partners for our show. My guest today is Krista Hesdorfer, the Director of Public Affairs for Hunger Solutions New York, a nonprofit organization dealing with food insecurity issues across our state. Krista, welcome back to North Country Matters. This is such an important topic, and the timing couldn't be better. You were here in the spring to talk about the budget implications for hunger in America. Well, the federal budget bill passed, and now we're reaping the whirlwind from it, as opposed to the crops that we could be using to feed people. Compounded by that is the government shutdown now in its second month. Food insecurity here in New York and all across the country is much worse than it was when we talked in the spring. So, Krista, let's take a moment to set the stage for our discussion. Can you give us a brief history of federal food programs in this country?
Sure. So the earliest version of SNAP really started in the 1930s. It was part of the response to the Great Depression. It was intended both to help families who were struggling, of course, with food insecurity at that time, but it also was intended to boost the economy and help manage agricultural surpluses. That program was temporary, but it was hugely popular, and it clearly gained traction politically. In 1964, President Johnson called for a permanent food stamp program as part of his war on poverty. And again, it had this dual purpose of both supporting nutrition for low-income families and strengthening the agricultural economy. In 2008, the food stamp program officially changed its name to what we know it as now, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. Currently, the program serves about 42 million Americans, including about 3 million New Yorkers. It is by far our largest and most effective anti-hunger program. It's proven to improve food security, mental and physical health, and has a wide range of other positive outcomes for families and for the economy. Unfortunately, today we're experiencing an unprecedented disruption to the program for really the first time in history. This is the first time that SNAP benefits have lapsed due to a government shutdown. So for those 42 million Americans who rely on the program, this is a period of serious food hardship and uncertainty.
Yes, and this is actually a man-made crisis. There's no reason for this to happen. We've had other government shutdowns or lack of funding, but SNAP has always been funded. This is a deliberate cessation of that program this year, isn't it?
You're exactly right. So USDA has both the funds and the authority to sustain SNAP benefits in a shutdown. They have about $5 billion in contingency funds that are intended to sustain SNAP in an emergency or a shutdown. They also authority to transfer additional funds, and there's about 16 billion from what we can tell of additional funds at their disposal. So they can easily meet the 8 billion that they need for November benefits, and they could have simply issued November SNAP benefits without any delay or disruption. Instead, they have chosen to disrupt benefits. They've pulled down their own contingency plan off of their website and made false claims that they don't have authority and there's nothing that they can do.
Well, of course, there is something that can be done. And every day that we know that SNAP funding is held up or the benefits are reduced, vulnerable families and individuals go without. Millions of people in this country who are elderly, disabled, veterans, children, unemployed, or at risk of hunger, and food banks are on the brink of a huge crisis because they've had such unprecedented numbers of people they've been trying to help. So, two courts ordered the Trump administration to fund SNAP, but the federal response has been anemic at best, with no real guarantee that any of that money or food will be released anytime soon. Let's talk about what this really means here in New York State, Krista.
So you're right. Late last week, 2 federal judges ordered USDA to use their contingency funds to issue benefits. They did leave open this question of whether USDA would transfer additional funds to cover full November benefits, or if they would just use contingency funds and issue partial benefits. On Monday, USDA responded to the courts and told them that they would do basically the bare minimum and just use the contingency funds to provide partial benefits. This is something that's never happened before, and it is an administrative nightmare to fund partial benefits. USDA did get guidance out to states yesterday, and as we speak, they are working as quickly and effectively as they can to get partial benefits out the door. But at the same time, this plan from USDA is continuing to be challenged in court. So things may change again in the coming days, hopefully for the better. But in the meantime, it's really an underwhelming at best response from USDA. We know that families need their full benefit issuance and that even full SNAP benefits have long been inadequate to cover a month of food costs for families. So issuing partial benefits is just not acceptable.
No, it isn't. And we have seen the administration defy court orders continually for the last year. They have just not paid any attention to court orders. And so the courts really don't have a lot of to fall back on. And if they don't follow the orders, people are going to be hurt. So the long-term results of the federal budget bill on SNAP will create even more barriers to making sure that children, the disabled, and the elderly have enough food to eat. Let's talk about those long-term consequences, Krista.
So HR 1, that budget bill that was passed this summer, included the largest cut to SNAP in American history. It cuts about $187 billion from SNAP over the next 10 years. It accomplishes those cuts in a variety of different ways. First, it shifts enormous amounts of SNAP costs from the federal government onto state and county budgets. It does that in two ways. It is cutting federal support for SNAP administration in half. That used to be a 50-50 split between the state and federal government. In New York, we're county administered for SNAP, so the counties take on 50% of that cost. Now those county and state governments are going to have to handle 75% of SNAP administrative costs. That's about $200 million in additional costs on our state and county governments. Even more than that is a cost shift in SNAP benefit dollars. It has always been the case that the federal government has covered 100% of the SNAP benefits that families use to buy food. They are now walking away from that commitment and forcing states to cover a portion of benefit costs. That is estimated to cost New York $1.2 billion annually, starting within the next few years. In addition to those cost shifts, HR 1 also reduces access and eligibility for the program. It expands work reporting requirements that basically put a 3-month time limit on SNAP. So unless you can meet and document certain work hours, you can only participate in SNAP for 3 months in a 3-year period. There are certain exemptions, but the bill narrowed those exemptions quite a lot. So there are hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers who are at risk of losing some or all of their SNAP benefits for that reason. It also limits eligibility for immigrants. Immigrant eligibility for SNAP was already very strict. Undocumented immigrants have never been eligible for SNAP, and many lawful present immigrants still have to wait 5 years to participate. This bill makes SNAP eligibility even harsher for immigrant families. It limits it to just US citizens, legal permanent residents, Cuban and Haitian entrants, and COFA citizens. So refugees and asylees who may have previously been eligible, that status is no longer enough to qualify for them if they don't meet, legal permanent resident status. There were some other changes in sort of the budgeting side that are a little bit more in the weeds, but what they will do in effect is reduce benefit amounts for all people who receive SNAP. So those 3 million New Yorkers will all see the impacts of this bill.
So we're really throwing a lot of this onto the states who may or may not be able to actually fund it or may not want to fund it, because we know there's a big difference between how states treat this particular issue across the country. What's ironic about this is that members of Congress get $79 a day for meals. Yet a majority of them voted to reduce SNAP benefits for Americans who only get an average of $6.31 in SNAP. And those same members of Congress who haven't worked in weeks because they don't want to deal with the budget mess have decided that Americans who don't work won't get any benefits in the budget bill they passed. Your organization, Hunger Solutions New York, works at a number of different levels. Tell us what you are advocating for at the federal level right now, please.
Well, of course, in this moment, we are advocating for USDA to immediately release full funds for November SNAP benefits and get guidance out to states so that they can provide food aid, full food aid to families as quickly as possible. But we're also looking past the shutdown and to an end of year spending agreement that will be negotiated. We see an opportunity there for significant investments in SNAP. And specifically, we're looking to repeal or at least significantly delay the cost shifts that I mentioned just a few minutes ago that were included in that budget bill over the summer. Even among members of Congress who voted for HR 1, we're starting to hear some hesitation about those cost shifts, especially the administrative cost shift that affects counties here in New York. Counties have very few sources of revenue, and they're going to need to somehow account for these enormous costs that are being shifted onto their budgets. So lawmakers in DC are realizing, oh no, our counties might need to raise property taxes because of this cost shift that we've now implemented on them. And so we're seeing even some of those members who were supportive of the bill are sort of walking back that piece. And we really hope that there's a window of opportunity to help minimize some of the damage of that bill in an end of year spending agreement.
There's nothing like the devil in the details to get your attention, is there? So another very harmful Trump administration move has been to hamper the all-important gathering of real-world data collection and reporting on hunger. They've just stopped that. How does this affect our understanding of the true state of hunger in New York and in the country without this important data collection?
The USDA has issued a household food security report every year for 30 years. And that's a really critical source of data for anyone who cares about hunger as an issue, or especially people who want to make sure that we're designing effective programs and policy interventions that actually alleviate food insecurity. Each year, we can see from that report how many families in each state and nationwide are experiencing low or very low food security, and we can monitor that over time. The report also includes certain demographic breakdowns, so we can see where there are disparities. For example, we know that food insecurity affects households of color at a much higher rate than white households, and households with children disproportionately experience food insecurity as well. That data is really important for making us aware of where current policies and programs are missing the mark, where we need to strengthen programs, alleviate barriers to participation. Without that data, it will be much harder to monitor the impacts of HR 1. And I would posit that perhaps that's the point of canceling the report. It's sort of hard to imagine that the administration would cancel data collection on hunger if they thought that data was going to paint a flattering picture of how their policies are affecting food security.
I suspect you're exactly right about that. So during the federal shutdown, several states are taking action to help mitigate the problem of the discontinuation of SNAP funds. Here in New York, Governor Hochul has issued millions in emergency food assistance, but emergency assistance isn't the long-term answer, is it?
You're exactly right. So emergency food programs are critical, especially right now as SNAP benefits are disrupted. They are seeing a surge in demand and they need additional resources. So we applaud the governor providing $65 million in additional funds for emergency food programs, but nothing matches the scale of SNAP. For every one meal provided through a food bank or food pantry, SNAP provides 9 meals. SNAP each month brings about $640 million in food benefits into New York State alone. So you look at that $65 million versus $640 million, there's just no way that that's going to be able to fill the gap for families. So we are first and foremost calling on USDA to solve this problem. It is their responsibility and they have the resources at their disposal. But in the face of federal inaction, we hope that New York will step in and provide supplemental SNAP benefits to help fill the gap.
And of course, we're also talking about it's not just not having food on the table. It's also affecting small grocery stores and large grocery stores. Every community, that's a tremendous economic driver. That those SNAP dollars, when people come in and buy food in their local store, that's a huge economic driver that is just been cut off, and that's going to have a long term effect on overall economic stability and growth too, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. So about 17,000 retailers in New York State accept SNAP benefits. That includes grocery stores, bodegas, small businesses, farmers markets. And every dollar in SNAP benefits is estimated to generate about $1.50 in economic growth. So we're all going to see the ripple effects of this disruption throughout our economy.
Right, and at the worst possible time of the year, with everything that's going on in other ways economically based on Trump decisions about things like tariffs. So it's just compounding a bad situation. So let's take a look at next year's budget here in New York, which the legislature has to start wrestling with in January. We're not just talking about food here. There are the escalating costs of healthcare, concerns about housing and heating costs, the continuing limits being placed by the federal government on many programs that millions of people rely on. This all puts pressure on our state budget, won't it?
It will. This will be an incredibly difficult state budget year and years really ahead. In addition to those enormous cost shifts that we talked about for SNAP, there are similar cost shifts for Medicaid that are going to put extraordinary pressure on our state budget. I don't envy the folks who need to try and make the numbers work. At the same time, the state is much better resourced to respond to this than your average low-income family who's just trying to make ends meet. So we still hope and expect that our state lawmakers will prioritize investments that help working families, that help low-income families get through this crisis. And we have a number of investments in SNAP and child nutrition programs that we'll be bringing to the table.
And let's not forget to reiterate the point. This is a man-made crisis. It is not something that had to happen. It's a deliberate crisis, and it's coming from the top down. So what are your organization's top anti-hunger priorities for this coming year's budget?
First and foremost, we need New York State to fully backfill those federal cuts to SNAP administration. This should not be New York's responsibility, but it has become New York's responsibility. We need to make sure that our state and county agencies have the resources they need to administer the program. Also included in that cut is a cut to SNAP outreach and application assistance provided through other programs. At Hunger Solutions New York, we administer the Nutrition Outreach and Education Program, or NOAP. It's a statewide network of SNAP navigators who help families connect with SNAP, submit their documentation, overcome any barriers they might be facing in that process. That program is included in the HR1 cut. So we will need to cut about 25% of our SNAP navigators if the state budget doesn't fully backfill the federal funding cut there. So we're encouraging state lawmakers to make whole all parts of SNAP that were cut federally, but also to look forward and look to build and strengthen the program in New York. We are, alongside many other partners, advocating for some state supplements to SNAP. We're looking for a state-funded food benefit for people who are excluded from SNAP solely due to their immigration status. Now more people, thanks to HR1. We're also continuing to push for a supplement to increase the minimum SNAP benefit to $100 per household. And we really need New York to fund the transition to EBT chip cards to protect the SNAP benefits that people already receive. There has been an absolute epidemic of SNAP skimming, people having their benefits stolen off of their cards. And we just need our agency to get the dollars to transition to more secure cards.
And that's something that some states have been doing. This is not technology that we don't have access to. Again, we just need to make sure it's happening. So advocacy is going to be an important part of making sure that the next state budget won't harm the most vulnerable people in New York. How can people help to advocate as the new session goes forward? What do you need us as citizens to do to help you in your work?
Constituent voices are the most important advocacy tools. Your representatives will respond most to your needs and feedback. We can share data and stories all day long, and we do, but hearing from constituents really makes a difference. So as the budget gets closer, I would encourage anyone who can advocate to please reach out to your members, let them know that anti-hunger investments really need to be a priority in the state budget this year. If folks are not already connected with Hunger Solutions New York, please feel free to visit our website and sign up for our advocacy alerts. We send out updates as the state budget's moving along and opportunities to get involved in ways that are really pretty easy to do, ready to send emails, social media toolkits, try to make it as easy as possible for folks to get involved.
Yes, you do have an easy advocacy website to use. It's also important to remind folks that next year is a state election year, when every member of the state legislature is going to be up for election. And if they aren't doing what we need them to do, and they're not paying attention, then we have another option next November, which is to send somebody new to their office, because it's really important that they listen to us and do what we need them to do if they want to continue to have their job. So one of the things that we've seen just in the last few days here in New York and all across the nation is people opening up their wallets and their hearts to make sure everybody in their community has food during this crisis, especially as the holidays approach. Local food banks have both dreading the end of SNAP and trying to prepare for the influx of people in need. Many food banks only can provide emergency or temporary help, which doesn't address the crisis at hand, as we've already mentioned. What is Hunger Solutions seeing on sort of the local ground in terms of places? Because you're in touch with a lot of these folks across the state, aren't you?
We're seeing huge surges in demand for emergency food resources, but more than anything, we are seeing fear and uncertainty among people who rely on SNAP to put food on the table. They are getting mixed messages, including from their own federal government, about what's going to happen with their November SNAP benefits and what they can expect. So we are really aiming to be a source of accurate information for people. We are monitoring the federal and state developments very closely, sending out updates as often as we can. I really encourage folks to defer to the state agency websites, New York State Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance and the Department of Health. They have accurate, timely information that they're sharing about SNAP and WIC, and they've been really excellent resources for folks as the shutdown has continued.
And the other thing that people can do is they can reach out to their local food bank, and they can make donations. They can make sure that they're part of the solution for their neighbors. There's a lot of opportunity to do that. Almost every little community has a food bank, whether or not it has a physical location with open hours. It has something somebody can call and say, I'm in trouble, I need help. And it's so important that we all reach out and do that. I just want to tell a quick story about a friend of mine from a small community here in St. Lawrence County who decided to organize a walk and just used a few of her neighbors and friends and got donations. And in 2 weeks had over almost $1,400 that was donated to this little tiny food bank, which is only open on an emergency basis. People can do things. And they need to be doing things, because we have to make sure that, especially as we're coming up into the colder weather months and the holidays, that we remember people in our community who may not have the resources that we have. So any final thoughts as we close out here today, Krista?
Well, I just want to thank everyone for what they are doing. We have seen an extraordinary response across the state and the country. People asking, what can I do to help? No matter what they have for resources, what can I do to help? What's my piece? And that really does matter. It makes a huge difference. None of this should be responsibility of small communities scrambling to fill the gaps. As we've talked about today, this is a federal responsibility, and we need USDA to step up and do what they need to do to get benefits out the door. But in the meantime, it's been deeply moving to see our communities mobilize in this way to support our neighbors. I hope that as part of that response, people are thinking about advocacy. Maybe today's conversation has helped with that. We really need to make sure that our federal and state governments are taking action at that broader scale so that people have access to the food they need on a consistent basis.
This has been a moving crisis since January, and it's going to continue to be a crisis, and not just in food or perhaps in heating funds and things like that. There's just so many ways that we really need to address what is going on in this country and the fact that average people are being forgotten. We're all being thrown under the bus. And I'm sure that all of those billionaires in the cabinet are going to be just fine. But the rest of us need to look out for each other, and we need to change how the direction this country's going in, because it's not a good situation right now for millions and millions of people in this country. So thank you, Krista, for the work your organization is doing, for your giving us your time and thoughts today. And we will be back in touch with you, especially as we get into the new state budget cycle, because we want to keep people informed. We want them to be able to realize that they have the power to advocate and to change the direction that we're going in. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So these conversations are a production of North Country Matters. This show is a civic collaboration between the League of Women Voters of St. Lawrence County and the Potsdam Public Library. Until next time, remember, our North Country matters, and whatever you can do to help is going to make a positive difference. And that is something we all can participate in. Thank you.